Sephora stores are everywhere you are. So just pop in. When you need a brown lip to match your 90s playlist. A confidence boost before your interview? Or a last-minute gift for mom's birthday. There's always a Sephora near you. Just pop in. Use our store locator to find your local Sephora or Sephora at Kohl's.
This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. Get in, loser! Mean Girls is now streaming on Paramount Plus. Join Katie Heron as she meets the plastics in Tina Fey's new twist on the modern classic. Get ready for more of the rumors, backstabbing, and jokes you loved from the original movie with some fetch surprises. Rated PG-13. Wear pink and head to ParamountPlus.com to try it free.
What does filmed for IMAX mean? It isn't just a movie that'll look great on IMAX's screens. It means that hiding from a sandstorm feels like fear in every flicker. And every triumph is felt in every sound wave. And the things we've only imagined, you can truly experience those too. That's what filmed for IMAX means. Get tickets to experience Dune Part 2 now and IMAX's exclusive expanded aspect ratio.
Slashers, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking twins and mirrors, we're talking spiritualism, and we're talking Kristen fucking Stewart. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking I Am on the Landing.
Oh my god.
Everyone, we are discussing Olivier Assayas' Personal Shopper, a very modern addition to the Criterion Collection, mind you.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it had already been selected, but after watching the film for the very first time, I realized, yeah, this movie's pretty fucking good.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that, as I'm sure our guests will be very glad to hear you say that as well. So I'm just gonna jump in and bring him in, okay, Joe? Everyone, he is a film journalist with bylines at Bloody, Disgusting, and Dread Central. You may also remember him from our previous episodes on The X-Files I Want to Believe, I Know What You Did Last Summer, It Follows, Suspiria, and The Mothman Prophecies. Please welcome my better half, Ari Drew.
Ooh.
Hello, I'm back,
Hi.
y'all. Can't get rid of me.
Such a short turnaround this time, too.
It really was. I was kind of surprised when I saw this on the calendar. I was like, oh, we're doing this already. Let's go then.
Peek behind the curtain, everyone. My husband does get one free episode a year. It just so happens that this is like 3 months after the last one.
Well, I appreciate you all having me back, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. And Joe, Trace is correct. I was so thrilled to hear that you liked this. Initially, I misheard him, and I thought he said Joe didn't like Personal Shopper, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
No. Well, but Ari, because again, you picked this movie. Why?
Well, I think by now maybe there's a little bit of a pattern with the types of movies that I've been picking. With this is more in line, I guess, with the It Follows and Suspiria of it all. I really like, kind of moody movies that cross genres often. I like just kind of atypical spooky stories. I love like character studies and kind of these existential explorations. And so this movie really kind of has all of that stuff, which is it's just right up my alley. It's a movie too that, I mean, what I think is going on narratively at times, and also just kind of the meaning and intention behind it, it kind of changes a lot. And I watch this movie often because of the vibe. I just like the vibe. I think it's a mysterious, engaging movie that doesn't spoon feed anything to you.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think it's kind of just a special piece of cinema. And I also, when I first caught this, it was right in my Kristen Stewart, my own personal moment of falling in love with her as an actress and as a queer person. And I've become obsessed with her since this film. I think she's fantastic and criminally underrated. And I'm glad that she's found her footing in particularly around genre films. I think that's been really exciting to see. So yeah, all of that.
And I think it's because, have we covered a Kristen Stewart film before, Joe?
We have covered Underwater on the Patreon. And of course, we're also covering Love Lies Bleeding on the Patreon this month. So it's like our Kristen Stewart month.
Yes. Well, okay, but I don't think we had a chance in Underwater to talk about her interesting career choices because, I'm kind of like soft positive Underwater, but that's not the kind of like weird project that she would pick, like something like Personal Shopper, you know?
Yeah, Underwater feels more in line with this, like, honestly, with the selection, like the Charlie's Angels movies, like the movie that she did. But it was so much, you know, it's a big budget. It's pretty straightforward sci-fi thriller, horror film. But again, like its ties to, cosmic horror and Lovecraft with the Cthulhu stuff. Like I love Underwater, just so you know.
And I actually wonder if she hated working on that like she did Charlie's Angels. I'm going to choose to believe that she enjoyed working on Underwater.
She definitely seems to be more of an indie baby. And I think we're all going to go on record as saying we're very pro Stewart. So I appreciate that, much like we were talking about Chloe Grace Moritz last week on Greta. You know, there's a bunch of people who don't think that Stewart is a very good actor and they don't like her. They find her bland or boring. Honestly, folks, you have got to check out her filmography because half the time that is a very deliberate perception. And I think she's a very astute as an actor. Like she's very careful in the projects she picks, particularly over the last like 5-ish years. As soon as she got out of that Twilight persona, I think she and Robert Pattinson have both been very selective about the work they do. Well,
and I will say, I mean, like for the people that say, oh, she doesn't have a personality, you know, she's just very monotone, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I would actually say go watch that Charlie's Angels movie, which is a fine movie, but
she's the best part.
It's very against type for her though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought the movie was cute. It was fun. And seeing her do something like that was a good time. You know, again, people have just gone so hard on her since Twilight, and I, you know, I don't blame them. Those movies are what they are for, you know, they exist in this universe for a very large group of fans, and you know, it's one of those fan bases that is very intense, you know. But I also think there's something about her just as an actress in general, and just seemingly as a person too. I love watching more modern interviews and reading interviews with her because I just think she's just a fascinating human, and I tend to agree with a lot of things she's, you know, saying about art and how she views film and everything. So yeah, I don't know. It's just nice to see her step out of that shadow and kind of be free from this this forever role as Bella, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, okay, so moving into Personal Shopper itself. So as I said, this was written and directed by Olivier Assayas, and he is best known for writing the 1996 French comedy drama Irma Vep, as well as creating the 2022 HBO miniseries adaptation of it that starred Alicia Vikander. Prior to making Personal Shopper, though, he wrote and directed the critically acclaimed film Clouds of Sils Maria. And have either one of y'all seen this movie?
I have not.
I haven't, and I almost watched it actually a couple days ago. But yeah, no, I definitely will be diving into some of his more of his work, because especially his genre-leaning work, because I know that he does a lot of very kind of hard to define types of films. And so, I know that Clouds of Sils Maria, though, is probably most in line with this one versus some of his others.
Well, I do want to read that because I didn't know what Clouds of Sils Maria was about. And truthfully, like, it was a movie where the title kind of put me off of it. But that was Assayas' first film with Kristen Stewart. And he wasn't expecting to do another one with her so soon, which is why Personal Shopper came as a surprise for them. But Clouds of Sils Maria follows an established middle-aged actress played by Juliette Binoche, who is cast as the older lover in a romantic lesbian drama opposite an upstart young starlet played by Chloe Grace Moretz. But she is overcome with personal insecurities and professional jealousies, all while sexual tension simmers between her and her personal assistant, played by Kristen Stewart. And because of this film, Kristen Stewart became the first American actress to win a Caesar Award, which is the French version of the Oscars.
It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I want to watch this immediately.
Same.
But,
yeah.
But you're right, Ari. I mean, when you look at his filmography, it's really... he is playing in this weird genre adjacent sandbox. And so many of his films sound really interesting, but I feel like he's just not a known entity outside of indie art circles in North America.
Yeah, I was just reading an article around this from around the time that this film came out, where he talked about some influences. I don't remember if it was like generally or just for this film, but it was like David Cronenberg and I think John Carpenter. I was just really surprised and, kind of how he relates to more genre filmmaking as opposed to more like quote unquote serious, capital F filmmaking, but just kind of how it more viscerally tends to get people's reactions and the way that it taps into its audience's fears and all of that. It feels more overt. And I think that there is this mix with him, right? There's like this ambiguous. And as we see in this movie, there's also moments where it's like, nope, this isn't a metaphor. This is literal.
Yeah.
This is a literal ghost movie.
That's the thing. If y'all listen, if you have not seen this movie and you're like, oh, is it going to be one of those movies where it's like, oh, it's ambiguous. It's up to the viewers to determine if the ghosts are real or not. There are ghosts in this movie.
Yep.
There are, but it is very ambiguous. Like, Trace, I remember at the end of last week's episode, you prefaced this by saying, oh, it's a slow burn. Don't go in expecting a ton of genre elements. You have to be patient with it. And I love that fine line. He's really doing a tightrope walk with this film where in some capacity, this is just a movie about a twin who's grieving the loss of her brother. And then on the other half of it, it's this existential ghost story. And I love the way that the two kind of come together.
Also murder mystery.
Right. Yes.
but I think that's going to throw people, though, because I think people think that that's going to have really more to do with the central plot, and it's very much a secondary plot. Well, I'll tell you all later, but I'll tell you now, actually. But this film was booed at its Cannes premiere, and Assayas attributes that to people not fully understanding the ending.
Which is wild, because Cannes is filled with polarizing films, many of which get like 10-minute standing ovations.
He also, Assayas won Best Director at Cannes for this film. So it's such an interesting dichotomy, where it's like, oh, like all these people booed it, but look, he also won this award, so someone liked it.
I also think like Cannes is a bit known for like the reactions as much as the lineup. And so it's like, oh gosh, at Cannes, people ran out of the theater. People were so pissed. People booed and people, or it's very hyperbolic. And so it's kind of, I almost wonder when I hear stories like that, I'm like, oh, was this audience just like anything that has something that I can be upset about or that I can just like glob onto? Yeah, just go for it. I want to be part of the Cannes experience of booing or doing a 10-minute, standing ovation.
Well, that's okay. Honestly, I think the longest standing ovation I've heard of at Cannes was 16 minutes. And I want to be like, 16 minutes?
Okay.
Like, what?
Absolutely not.
Come on.
I'm checking my watch and walking out of that theater. Okay, but when it comes to Personal Shopper, Assayas says that the origin of the film traces all the way back to his childhood because he grew up in the countryside and his father was a writer and he had a huge library of books. And Assayas was distinctly fascinated by the books his father had that dealt with the occult. One book particularly frightened him, and this was a 3-volume series from the late 19th century called Death and Its Mystery by Camille Flammarion. The 3 volumes were Before Death, During Death, and After Death, and they detailed the experiences of people who had paranormal experiences. But the thing is, though, these books weren't presented as fiction. There was a documentary feel to them with all of the accounts presented as fact, and reading this as a child, it terrified him, and ever since, he wanted to make sense of his connection to that world, and eventually, of course, with this film, would decide to do so through art.
That sounds very appropriate for children.
Yeah. That's something you would have done, Ari.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's one thing I actually really like about this because, and watching it this time, knowing kind of the links to spiritualism and how much it's really overtly discussed a bit, overtly in the sense, for this type of movie. Because again, things kind of, I guess like materialize in and materialize out. So literally and figuratively as the movie unfolds. But I actually had just one of my favorite podcasts covered a couple of episodes with, where they focus on a couple of pretty prominent spiritualists and the movement itself, which I had been a little bit familiar with, but definitely got a lot more information recently. And so watching this through that lens as well, and just kind of knowing a bit more around, maybe some of like the political social context of spiritualism. Right. It actually makes me view this movie kind of as in a bigger way, in like a more, I don't know, it feels queerer. It feels more, challenging at times than maybe initially when I first watched it, just knowing kind of what it's adjacent to. So yeah, definitely all this right up my alley.
I should point out, by the way, I'm getting all this information from an interview with Assayas on that Criterion Blu-ray. He is very informative, by the way.
Yeah, he's so concise, too. It's like a 16-minute interview, and every line is a nugget of just great information. He's very, very clear, very concise.
Yeah, and it's very... I love seeing a director that's like, no, this is exactly what I want to do, how I wanted to do it. Like, he is an artiste.
Say French, come on.
I know. But okay, so decades later, when he's a grown man, he was thinking about how he would try to, again, like work through this spiritualism thing that he's trying to study. And he had an image of a girl carrying bags on a scooter in Paris and hating the job that she does. But that was as far as the concept initially went. Nevertheless, the idea stayed with him because he liked the idea of someone alone in a big city doing a stupid job and surviving by connecting to art. So much later, many years later, he was in Toronto preparing for a film that never happened because the day before shooting it all fell apart.
Sidebar, the fact that he does not name the film or discuss what it was about. Ooh, I wanted to know so bad.
I want to know it too. Although I wonder if we would know what it was if it never happened,
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if we probably could have searched and found some kind of announcement, because if he got that close to shooting, they would have had some sort of press release. Like, I remember when Karen Kusama was going to do her Dracula film and we got all those announcements and then they canceled it right before she was going to shoot. Although, you know what? That just made me more pissed off. So it's probably best not to know.
Happy times.
I just want to jump in real quick. I did find the info on the movie that was canceled.
Oh, what was it?
Yeah, it was called Idol's Eye. It was supposed to have starred Robert De Niro and Robert Pattinson.
Oh,
hilarious.
Yeah, and then let's see, the company Benaroya Pictures said that it's decided to not go ahead after producers failed to meet the criteria for financing. Company retains the right to the project. So it's based on a Hillel Levin 2007 Playboy article called Boosting the Big Tuna. Yeah. And it's centered on a true story of a group of common criminals who rob a sex store backed by Chicago mafia boss Tony Accardo.
Okay, so that would have been Robert De Niro, and I'm assuming Robert Pattinson would have been one of the thieves. That sounds awesome.
Super different type of movie. Yeah, it sounds like that would, but who knows with him? Like,
well, that sounds like a Safdie Brothers movie.
A little, yeah, kind of. But I almost wonder though, like, what if he had brought the same energy in Personal Shopper to that kind of idea? That could be an interesting mix up there too.
Yeah,
that's true.
But anyhow, just wanted to throw that out there.
No. That's great. But so this film falls apart. And so the next day he's on a plane to Paris with a very open agenda. And he's like, okay, I'm bored. What can I do? So he sits down, he stares at a blank page. And again, his mind keeps going back to that image of the girl on the scooter. But he also connected with a desire that he'd had for a very long time, which was to make a movie that wasn't necessarily a horror movie, but explicitly dealt with the supernatural. And he says, the supernatural's always been an undercurrent in his films, but he'd never taken the extra step to make the world where the supernatural is real.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, he says the reason that he never took that extra step is because when you start dealing with genre filmmaking, you're in an area where you're not so comfortable. Specifically, the stereotypes of American horror filmmaking. He doesn't come down on them, but he's just like, that doesn't really interest me. I want to do something that's uniquely my own and how I feel about it.
This feels so French to me, by the way.
I know. I feel like whenever we talk about Europeans, but specifically French filmmakers, the way they talk about like, oh yeah, the Americans and their lowbrow horror movies.
I'm also making a horror film, but I don't feel the need to define it, except in contrast to the Americans, because I'm definitely not doing that. But it's important to note that French people often don't love Americans, so it does make sense.
But remember, though, as we learned in our mini episodes on French extremity films, American horror films do really well in France. They just, I guess, don't think they're good.
Right.
So, but he continues about these stereotypes of American horror filmmaking. Because, when I hear that, I would think, Final Girl, sexuality, like the Scream rules, things like that. But he actually says, the distortion that you have good and you have evil. What is visible is good and what is out of you is evil, or the embodiment of evil, which is very different from what his vision of the supernatural is about. He thinks the supernatural is about what happens outside of the senses, but it is real and it could be a thing to connect with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm right. I love that. I think that that's really the way I view a lot of this stuff. And this is just kind of my, from my personal interests, obviously, with things like ghost hunting and cryptids and all of that stuff. A part of me and my personal belief systems, I definitely would say that I believe in energies and things that are beyond our understanding. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and I'm trying to think of what I just watched where it was, I want to say they said something like just because you encounter something that you've never encountered before doesn't make it supernatural. It may just mean that the science around it or our understanding of it has not advanced to the point that we can explain it. And usually that's what people need. They need an explanation. And so anything that defies that, yeah, it is kind of like, it's generally viewed it fearfully. I mean, it's kind of this very human reaction, I think, of, oh God, what is this thing? My mind can't comprehend it.
Kill it with fire.
You hear about that a lot too, whenever people actually talk as well about like actual ghost encounters or encounters with weird, phenomena, or like seeing something crazy emerge from the sky. So, that's not atypical, because I think there isn't, our brains too, when we see something that is just not typical, it can struggle to make sense of it. And so I like that perspective, because I think that's very real. I think, the world is much more complicated than people, maybe certain people would probably admit. And so it is easier to jump to, well, we already know what we know about science, and so this doesn't fit. So yeah, it must be bad or evil or from this other thing. And it's like, no, hold on a second. What if it is just part of our world and certain people can just access it more easily than others?
Do you believe that there are malevolent spirits out there, or do you think they're like a passive entity?
I think that I think energy can be positive, negative, indifferent. And I think, it just kind of varies. I think it really, what you go into it with depends, really influences quite a bit. Like, I can go into a house and convince myself that there is something really bad about the house, that there's something really creepy, threatening there. And that experience can be really colored by that. And I can't say whether, bringing that energy there provokes certain things to reflect that. Like, if we kind of create these self-fulfilling prophecies with our own energies we bring into experiences, that's kind of where I've landed is, and I've heard, on some other supernatural podcasts, this idea of kind of hauntings that are caused by people bringing, like there's, the Dybbuk box that's owned by, Zach Baggins, who's a big bro ghost hunter that people are, very popular, a ghost adventure show. It's probably like the most well-known, I would say, ghost hunting show, but he's a very like spectacle based guy. Mm-hmm, and he has this quote unquote Dybbuk box, which is actually debunked as being fake. It's like the person who created the initial ones, like copped to making it all up. But he was telling people, this is the real Dybbuk box. This is real. And so people would go into this terrified, and, some other kind of, people who work in this ghost hunting, spiritual, mystical spheres, have suggested like, well, yeah, if you go in there, you're probably going to feel something, because all these people are bringing their own fears into the space and their own views. And so it kind of imbues, I think, an environment with that energy.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I think it's just complicated. I do think though that like kind of the energy that we bring into anything really can impact the things we see, the things we feel. But who's to say that that's not, some type of a different type of haunting that is valid? It's not like it's a hallucination is what I'm saying. So like, who's to say that we can't create those things collectively? Like, I think about that. We talked about it a little bit with Mothman Prophecies, but the idea of like tulpas and egregores, like these imaginary friends that, your brain just has the power to create, and it depends on like belief and how heavy that is. And so, yeah, that's my long-winded answer on that it's complicated.
And actually, speaking of imaginary friends, we'll have an episode on Blumhouse's Imaginary on the Patreon this month as well.
Jesus.
Yeah, plug
Somehow
that.
I don't think they're going to be engaging with these subjects in the same depth and eloquence as what we just heard Ari do.
It looks like a real serious film.
No, I think you could do like a good Tulpa movie. I mean, there have been kind of variations of this already with like Z or what's the other one?
Oh, Z's good, yeah.
I like
Z, and then the one with the iPad or whatever. What is that one called? Come Play.
Come Play.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, which I really like those. But those kind of touch on that. So I don't know, maybe Imaginaries could be like a more mainstream. Yeah, those ideas are really interesting to me. So I wouldn't hate to see it in a more like mainstream movie kind of. Sure. Of course, it'll probably be pretty simplified, but I don't know. It could be fun. The trailer, remains to be seen.
It is from the director of Truth or Dare and Fantasy Island, so we'll see.
Those are guilty pleasures of mine, though. So I feel like I could have fun.
Yeah, but they're not deep movies.
Touche. Yeah. Well,
anyway,
we'll find out.
So going into how Assayas was going to do the supernatural, again, there are many different ways you can do it, as we've seen through the pantheon of ghost films across the decades. His plan was to make something that dealt with the supernatural, but in a very specific European way. And to him, this meant reconnecting with the golden days of that tradition of the late 19th century, because at that time, trying to connect with ghosts was part of the culture, when the presence of ghosts was fact as opposed to fantasy. And he goes on to describe and then show photos that people at the time made themselves surrounded by spirits. Now, these were all fakes, but they had a distinct look to them. And y'all can just go look up, like seance ghost photos in 1800s, whatever. But he says, even though they're fake, there's something genuinely disturbing about them. And so he decided to use images that corresponded to that, to what the mediums of the time thought they were seeing. And that's what the ghosts in this movie look like. Those kind of like spectral figures.
Ooh, that's cool.
They look so good too.
Mm-hmm. So talking about, though, again, the existence of an invisible supernatural world, that element of the film ties in with Assayas' view of technology. And he says, he's always been fascinated by how technology and methods of communication have evolved over the years, and that was always going to play a part in the loneliness of Maureen, the Kristen Stewart character. Because when you're alone, you're ultra-connected. The tool of communication allows you to preserve some abstract relationships to individuals who were not physically there. And in that loneliness, the open space of the internet gives reality to the past. So it's kind of really finds not just our relationship to the present, but also, he says vertically, I'm not really sure how that's different, but vertically, our relationship to the past. So he's kind of making this connection between the invisible world of technological communications and the spirit world. Like, how are they that different?
Mm-hmm. And I've got a reading I'm going to bring in that really touches on that and how it's woven throughout the film.
Yeah, so when Assayas started writing the script, he wasn't sure if it was going to be in French or English, but he knew he was going to shoot it in Paris and realized, if he was going to go on this track of loneliness, he needed his lead character to be a foreigner with no ties to the culture around her. And this is where Kristen Stewart comes in, because again, 8 months earlier, he was shooting Clouds of Sils Maria, and Stewart was the same age of the character in this new script for Personal Shopper, but he was like, she's never going to want to do this. She's going to think this movie's too weird. Which, funny, like now you'd be like, yeah, of course she'd do it.
Of course she'd do it. This is such a her movie.
Yes. But he loved the idea of her specifically because, in his words, and I quote, she had a veil in front of her that had to do with her tabloid and internet fame. And if you want access to her, the universality of humanity, you have to get rid of that. This is why, in both movies he's done with her, Clouds and Personal Shopper, the burden of fame is on another character in the film.
I think that's such a fascinating observation because, so much of how we look at Stewart is basically defined through the tabloids and what we think we know of her. So I love that he's just like, well, in order for the films to work, I can't have people looking at her through that same lens. So I need to acknowledge it, but shift it to another character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways he would accomplish this too, just from a technical standpoint, is so there's a lot of shots of Maureen, again, on the streets of Paris, running around Paris. But for a lot of those scenes, he would film her with a hidden camera to make it feel more like she was a natural part of the city and not an actress acting in a scene in a movie.
It's so smart. And also, it's kind of shocking that it works as effectively as it does because she is just out and about, surrounded by people for large sections of the film.
Totally. And I like that there's a really careful attention to kind of like the mundanity of her actions. Like we see her pouring herself coffee and, on her phone, like a lot of how it's framed in like when she watches the spiritualist video, it's just like we're watching what she's watching on YouTube on her phone while she's in the train, getting where she needs to go. I just love the attention to that because it's one of those elements of this movie that I think people would find as being very tedious or like, why do we need to see her go through all of the motions of travel and, whatever that is. But also like it just really works in building tension and also engaging you in the information that she's getting and the things that she's experiencing in this real time sense. And I love that. I think for me, it keeps it from being boring. It feels like you're right there with her, especially for chunks of this film where she's traveling and communicating with the mystery text person.
Yeah.
Well, it also makes her incredibly relatable from a regular person point of view. You know, her job is simultaneously glamorous and, as you said, Ari, completely mundane. She spends all of her time just going to stores, picking up things, and then going back home. Like, it's so repetitive. And that's where the supernatural mixes with it to create something exciting and different. And you can understand why she ends up getting wrapped up in it.
You know, I get that in a really personal sense, this idea of like, life feels this certain type of way. It's kind of like you feel stir crazy, or you feel like there's like ennui, like you just like, I just am not satisfied with anything going on. I can't be, I don't feel excitement in my life. There's nothing thrilling going on. And, I feel that during the COVID lockdown, many of us probably went through that, that kind of being forced to be in one space for a really long time and trying to find ways to enjoy life again and struggling to do that. And personally too, like, I think diving into the supernatural and the spiritual is really exciting, learning just kind of about the history and all of that, but just thinking about those things. And like, I found myself, I mean, that's whenever I put together the high queerness, the ghost hunting group that I run, because it was something that I felt a lot of passion towards, that I thought was exciting and engaging in a time where there was nothing, so to speak, like stimulating going on in my life. And it was kind of a nice little refuge from that. And so I can definitely see how this could show up for this character. Like I could relate to that in a big way.
Right.
So moving on, they began principal photography in October of 2015 in Paris, and they shot for 2 weeks before moving to Prague, London, and Oman to shoot on location. Personal Shopper had its world premiere at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 2016, where it competed for the Palme d'Or, didn't win, but as I said, Assayas won Best Director. It was released in the US in March of 2017 in a very limited release, only 4 theaters, but it made $80,000, making for a per-screen average of $20,000, which was the highest average of that weekend.
That's good, yeah.
It would add 31 theaters the next weekend, so, its widest release was like 35 theaters. It would go on to gross about $1.3 million domestically for a worldwide gross of $2.2 million against a $1 million budget. So it was a box office success, even though it barely made any money, but it also barely had a release.
Right.
Also, I doubt that anyone involved expected any of that. Really, it definitely seems more like Assayas has his own. He just is satisfied to get to make the films that he likes to make and have them screen, in places like the Cannes Festival.
Yeah, exactly. But luckily, critical reception is mostly positive. We're looking at an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 7.2 out of 10. It's got a 77 out of 100 on Metacritic, and Letterboxd users are coming in low this time. We've got a 6.8 out of 10 on Letterboxd.
Ouchie.
Yeah. I mean, it's still like a 3.5.
That's not that bad. Still. Yeah, that's like almost like a 3.5.
Well, I think too, for a film like this, I mean, again, like, I think this film is challenging in a way. And Joe, maybe you disagree with me. I do think some people will be bored by this movie.
No, I agree with that. I just think if you are plugged into this film's wavelength, you're really going to enjoy it. Like, I started out and thought, okay, yeah, it is slow. It's a little ponderous. It's a lot of silences, right? It's not a very dialogue heavy film. And yet by the end of it, I was completely engrossed, and I ended up waffling between a 4 and a 4.5.
Yay. I love to hear that, Joe.
But, all right. So that's the end of my segment. Joe, what happens in Personal Shopper?
Okay, so as I teased, I'm going to be referencing an article by Katie Barnett called Invisible Presences, the Elusive Twin and the Empty Screen in Personal Shopper, and that appeared in a journal called Revenant, Critical and Creative Studies in the Supernatural.
All right.
Cool. Okay, so we open on Maureen, who is played by Kristen Stewart, and she's collecting keys to a Parisian country home from Laura, who is played by Sigrid Bouaziz, who immediately drives away. So this woman is like, take the keys. I don't want to be here. I can't deal with it right now. So she mentions that she can't handle the memories. So we know that she has a personal connection to it. But I would say for about the first 15 minutes of this movie, You have no idea who any of these characters are, what their relationships are to one another. And it's that immediately confronting / challenging notion of, okay, you're just going to have to go along with it. You will figure it out in time.
Well, and I would argue too, I mean, because we didn't even learn Maureen's goal or the fact that she is a medium, really. Like, she never talks about what she's doing until 30 minutes into the film. So yeah, you gotta be along for the ride here.
Yeah, you got to be patient.
There's also I think because we're kind of being plopped into a world that's kind of already moving in real time. Yes. One thing too is I've seen this film probably 4 or 5 times at this point, but character names besides Kira and Maureen and Lewis, I just couldn't. I'm like, wait, what is this? What is the Lewis's ex's name? Oh, that's Ingo, the guy who Kira has a secret relationship with. So yeah, it's that feeling too, you're kind of walking into a conversation that's already happening.
Well, and I will say, and as a person with ADHD, it is a movie too where it's it doesn't highlight always important lines of dialogue. So you have to be listening. It's like the movie cuts and someone's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. And boom. Okay, cool. The movie's telling me, no, the film trusts you to pay attention.
Yes.
Yeah. I do want to have a conversation about the transitions in this movie as well.
The fade outs.
I love them.
They're so confronting, though. So often I kept thinking a scene was going to proceed or continue, and we just go to a fade out, and I thought, oh, okay. It almost feels like a slap in the face in certain instances where it's a strict denial of information. Yeah. And that is a very just unique way of constructing a film's narrative.
Well, you're going to laugh because I literally wrote, so I wouldn't forget, on the top of my notes, I put in all bold, underline, all caps, so many fade outs.
So many fade outs. You have never seen this many fade outs.
I was thinking of it too. It's kind of in that same way too, the way a film chooses to feed you important pieces of information or not, or it's kind of this emotional narrative edging. It brings you right to the edge of that, and then it's nope, we're going to the next thing now.
But I think what it also does is it adds a sense of uneasiness to the film, because again, as a viewer, you know how films are supposed to edit, you know how scenes are supposed to end, and this is kind of going against the norm, if that's maybe the right word I want to use. So I think when watching it, you're immediately unsettled by just seeing a film transitioning in a way that you're not used to, and transitioning so often in a way you're not used to.
So often. Yeah. I love the edging analogy, Ari, because that is what it often feels like. But yeah, it's one of those things where when you look at the way the story is told, it's definitely contributing to the experience because it's so blatant. I feel as though even casual film goers would start to notice how often it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Okay. And it becomes a part, kind of an integral part to how you experience this story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we watch Maureen as she wanders around the empty ground floor of this house. Again, we have no information about who she is, what her relationship to it is. But as she's wandering from, kind of day to night even, she seems to be pausing. She seems like she's looking for something, or she's trying to sense something. And when she senses something, we don't actually see anything. She just seems to feel like something is there. And then she asks Lewis. And then we go to our fade to black. And
what are you talking about, woman?
Who? What? What's happening? So in the morning, Laura returns and she wants to discuss the presence in the house. Okay, so yes, we latched onto something in the way that Maureen did. And she says it was keeping its distance. And then she asks Laura if the cross in the stairwell was always there.
And we don't get an answer, do we?
We do not get an answer, and I think this is the only time religion is brought up in the entire film.
Which I quite appreciate.
Oh yeah, I think what I really appreciate about this movie coming from this, in part from this spiritualist lens, is it is very much divorced from traditional religion. And so
it's almost scientific, right?
In a way, yeah. I mean, the spiritualism, really the idea was about that it is possible that our spirits do carry on after we die, and it is possible for the living to commune with those spirits that have passed on, and it is possible for those spirits to kind of have more knowledge and be able to provide some wisdom and guide. So it's like a spirit guide, like that, that concept came out of spiritualism. And so that they can provide some actual information about life and can be helpful. But over time, just some historical context, like a lot of this spiritualist work at the time, which involve like seances, involve like kind of just really, I guess, at the time, the challenge was, is this just another form of magic tricks? Is this genuine? And the magicians actually were very much against spiritualists. They felt like they were frauds, and a lot of them got exposed by magicians and other people who were skeptics. And so, but this spiritualist perspective is more just kind of like purely divorced from any kind of religious dogma and any set of beliefs about God and the devil, the things that we would typically associate with death and the afterlife. And so it is kind of purely like about how are we as people connecting with those that have passed on through these different methods.
It's so interesting, though, because I will confess when I was watching this, even though it's not a direct one-to-one comparison, the vibe or the feeling that I was getting, it reminded me a fair amount of The Others, which is deeply religious.
Ooh.
I wonder if that's the European aspect of it, though, right? Because that's a Spanish film, whereas this one's French.
It is. Yeah, I think it was like the mystery involved in the spiritualism and the search for whether or not life after death exists.
Mm-hmm. Well, but also, though, that Nicole Kidman's character, and like the characters are deeply religious in that film, but the way it handles spiritualism isn't necessarily religious, right? Because there is true. It doesn't really address whether they go see God or hell. They're all stuck on Earth.
Right. Yeah. Which, of course, we discussed a lot in that episode with Nicole Goebel, right? Like, are they in purgatory if the film isn't explicitly saying religion and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we head to a cafe where we meet potential home buyers Jerome, who is played by Pascal Rambert, as well as Cassandre, who is played by Audrey Bonnet. And they're speaking with Laura in French about how Maureen is doing, whether she feels uncertain about them buying the house and so on. And when she sits down, they tell her about a painter from Stockholm who is named Hilma af Klint, who claims that spirits commissioned her work. So they're actually very low-key and understanding of what Maureen is going through. Like, they have already technically bought this house and they want to move in and make changes, but they don't want to do it without her permission because they want to make sure that any connection to Lewis has either passed or that Maureen is okay with it.
Well, and I want to point out, because I looked up this Hilma af Klint, because the thing is, she was producing works of abstract art years before abstract art became a thing. And so, she said, the spirits told me to do it this way. And it's almost like this thing, where if you're in the spirit world, time doesn't really exist. And that, I find that very fascinating.
Yeah. And the abstract art piece of things, like, I love that they incorporated this very true story about like, oh, this is kind of fascinating that these particular artists were making this type of art before there was a name for it, before it was known, because a lot of this idea around spiritualism is like, I'm receiving a message, like being a medium, like I'm getting moved to do this, or like with the photography, spirit photography, there was an element of art kind of inherent to some of these spiritualist methods, the tools that they would use to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Ari, this actually feeds into what you were saying off the top of the episode, which is that sometimes we don't have the capacity or the technology or the language even to understand some of this supernatural stuff. And that's really what this subplot is engaging with, right? I didn't realize what I was doing was creating abstract art. Because I didn't have the language. It hadn't really been discovered yet, but I was doing it in connection with the spirit world.
I love that point. That's such a good point, Joe. I didn't even think about it that way, but that is very much kind of what this experience is, I think, in a nutshell, for some believers out there. It's this, I'm open to whatever is going to happen and whatever I'm going to experience. even if it's something that's unfamiliar and that I can't really explain to other people.
And this feeds into how Maureen receives this information, right? You know, we don't know that she's a medium yet. She hasn't expressed that. We just know that she's attuned to feelings and energies and so on. But, you know, she's also very interested in tracking down concrete, rational information. So the very next scene is her on the bus or on the train looking up Af Clint, and she watches this video explaining who she was and so on. I'm going to bring in Barnett here for the first of many times. So she says, technology through the screens of her phone and laptop provides Maureen with a sense of assurance. These screens offer knowledge and communication, conferring a kind of power. So I love that this is where some of the tension in the film is coming from, is what is real, what isn't, and how do we confirm the notion of reality, right? Like, the film is interested in engaging whether ghosts are real, but specifically, is the ghost Lewis? And so much of Maureen's experience is, I don't know. So I love that this is her attempt to say, okay, I'm going to concretize this information. I'm going to look it up on my phone, on my device, because it's grounding me to a world I actually know.
And I love that, because even with that element of the plot and like kind of this grounding, you know, I think about things like TikTok is really kind of big on this, like these shorts of people experiencing, like, spooky TikTok communities are definitely a thing. There's like, oh, I caught this strange creature on this camera or on my camera. Oh, I saw this spirit or this thing moved. And so people have these videos of them experiencing these highly strange things. And again, because of technology now and advancements in AI and all of that, it's hard to, like, it's even harder than ever to discern, does this come from a valid source? What is the intention here? And it kind of reflects that in a very, kind of a, I guess, like a, what is the word I'm thinking of? A very, like, limited way, not limited, but there's like a little microcosm of that experience represented in this movie through the kind of unofficial research she's doing to try to understand these processes by watching the video. She watches the seance video, which I think is like meant to be, it's a reenactment, but it's just that kind of thing of, how do you kind of prepare yourself to better understand the
unknowable.
Yeah, the unknowable, like these things that really don't have an easy explanation. It's like, well, we have limited resources, and sometimes it is just kind of history, and sometimes it is just these videos that people are posting that are dubious, like you don't know if they're authentic or not. So yeah, I think it just kind of captures that piece of things and how technology, especially now, plays a big role in our understanding of the unknown.
So we see Maureen go to work, and, you know, if you know the title of the film, you obviously have a sense of what her day-to-day looks like, but it is interesting to see her go to these various designers. It's a very tactile experience, but technically she has to put herself into the mindset of somebody else, and I think that's where a lot of the duality in the film starts to come from. So we don't always know who Maureen is or how she identifies in terms of, like, who are you as a person, Maureen? But we do know that she's able to put herself into Kira's headspace because she has to go and shop for her, quite literally.
Which the prices for some of these things, do y'all not just like jaw on the floor?
Oh my God.
The blank check purchases.
Gosh, it's like, yeah, the belt's $500 and each bag is $2,000. I'm like, girl, what a life. I cannot even imagine.
And we don't even blink. There's never a hesitation. It's always, I'm going to take 2 of them. I need one in both colors so that she has an option. Oh, God. The wealth.
I do like these scenes, though. I mean, again, like we've talked to, I am not a fashion person. Like, the world of fashion doesn't interest me. It's too much to learn and whatever. But I find scenes like this, I'm like, oh, I'm living a little bit vicariously through these characters, because I feel like I'm getting a taste of what maybe understanding this looks like.
Well, there's a fantasy element component to this film, right? And I love that this is playing on Stewart's real life celebrity, right? Because you know that she is the Kira in real life. She has somebody who would do this for her, but she's very much a fashion girly. When you look at her red carpet looks, she is turning it out.
Yeah. Well, and I think also because she's a very, very, very big supporter of Chanel, which is why we see a lot of that in the film.
Okay.
Yeah, I love these scenes, actually, where she's shopping for Kira, and we're seeing how she looks at the different pieces, and it just like the way, like seeing her in this element of like, this is something that I do, that I'm good at.
It's a certainty too, right? Like she always knows what to get for Kira.
I'm just like, wow, that job, like, how do you even get there? And like, obviously it is like how much you know about fashion and people's tastes and what's all the trends, which is a whole language in and of itself.
But that's the thing though. I mean, she's good at her job, but she hates her job.
Yeah.
It's because it's not stimulating. Right. I like that. It's this idea of like it's like an extension of the banality of her being in this space where she's kind of floating around in this city, living in this shitty little apartment, kind of not doing much that's exciting her except for, waiting for her brother. And even then there's a lot of waiting, it's not that exciting.
But you're right there. It's the banality of just the day-to-day job. But again, the job happens to be in this extravagant world of high-end fashion.
Yeah, because when we see Kira's apartment, it is palatial. It's swanky, right? Like you think about how much an apartment like this would cost in Paris, and it would be astronomical. So not only do we know, money is no option when it comes to the clothing. It's like, yeah, this woman is ultra luxe. And then you juxtapose it with what we see of Maureen's apartment, which looks like a closet. And it's not surprising that she ends up making some of the decisions she does throughout the film, even though she has clearly been, sort of politely slapped for doing it in the past.
This episode is brought to you by Bumble. So, you want to find someone you're compatible with, specifically someone who's ready for a serious connection, totally open to having kids in the future, is a tall, rock-climbing Libra, and loves rom-coms with vegan pizzas on Tuesdays just as much as you do. Bumble knows that you know exactly what's right for you. So whatever it is you're looking for, Bumble's features can help you find it. Date now on Bumble.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
So I do want to highlight the fact that a lot of the time we see Maureen by herself or doing these banal interactions with people. Like she doesn't have a connection to any of these individuals, even though all of the designers know exactly who she is and who she represents. So I'm going to bring Barnett back in. Maureen's face-to-face interactions are minimal, both in occurrence and substance. She rejects verbosity in favor of introspection. On the occasions when she does speak, the quality is one of irregularity, as if she is unused to voicing her thoughts out loud. In many ways, she herself is a transient presence. She cuts an anonymous figure as she traverses urban landscapes on her scooter, bounces between London and Paris, and slips in and out of hotels, boutiques, and apartments.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to say, too, like she's basically like a specter in her own right.
Yes.
Even the scene I love when she goes in to try to talk to Kira when they're dealing with this
the gorillas.
With the gorillas, which I think is such a great specific conflict to be walking in on. You're just like, wait, what? What is this all about?
It's
this
so
this model has like this gorilla sanctuary or something, but
doing it all for the publicity.
Right. But Maureen's trying to get her attention, and she's like, Kira, and kind of like in a way that a ghost may be on the other side trying to be like, hey, look, pay attention to me. Like, I'm here.
Does she even exist? Is she even real?
Because this scene feels the most satirical, but I guess it also, what you just said, Ari, it's thematically appropriate.
Totally.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's that kind of smartness where the film doesn't hit you over the head with it with like a hammer or something. But if you're paying attention, it's very obvious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So before we get to that scene, we do learn a little bit more about Maureen. So after she picks up her paycheck from Kira's apartment, she goes to her. As we said, it's very shitty and small. She ignores a Skype call from what we will eventually learn is her boyfriend, Gary, who is played by Ty Olwyn. And, she's still watching the spiritualism. She's looking at theosophy. Is that?
Theosophy.
Which is, I was like, okay, that's a new term. I've never heard of that before.
You got to come to one of Ari's ghost hunting trips.
I guess.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely not. I'm not familiar with theosophy. I know it's like a kind of like a religious branching out of like maybe like related to spiritualism and different spiritual beliefs. But yeah, I really can't say I know much about it. So it's first I heard of it too.
Okay. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Probably most people have not heard of this word.
Right. Yeah. So she does eventually take a call from Gary, mostly so that she can complain about how much she doesn't like her job and she feels like she's wasting her time just looking for a sign. And he wants her to come to Muscat Omen, where he is working, but she's just not ready to move on, even though it has been months since Lewis's death. And at this point, it's like, we still don't entirely know who Lewis is. Is it her friend? Is it her brother? We eventually learn it's her twin brother. Important to note, we will briefly see Lewis at one point, and if you didn't know that was her brother, you would just be like, oh, that's some dude in the background.
Yeah.
I did want to point out, too, because during all this research she's doing, this is when she learns about, in some seances, they would communicate through ghosts with rappings, right. Which, coincidentally enough, was 2 years after Morse code was invented. But those rappings will obviously come back later in the film.
One for yes, two for no.
Yep.
Yeah, the rapping, too, just a little like historical. I actually did listen to a podcast on the Fox sisters, who were basically, that's like the origin of, I guess, the rapping communication spirit, like the knocking and all that to get answers. Those sisters, I think it was like a couple of younger sisters, basically ended up admitting to doing this to trick the older sister. So it was viewed as a hoax, even though they actually were kind of practicing out there for people and, presenting themselves as mediums. But that is the origin, I think, of this particular type of communication tool.
Right. And just in case people aren't clear, because of course, obviously, this is an audio medium, we're talking about rapping as in knocks, as Ari said, and not like, yo, 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 on the Fox sisters.
Oh my God.
Not hip-hop rappings of Joe Lipsit.
The whitest rapper on record.
Yo, yo, yo.
Do y'all remember those videos that people would make? They're like jib jab videos where you take a bunch of pictures of people that and then they put them on these dancing elves or these dancing characters. Have y'all ever seen that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You just put your face. Yeah, it looks really weird. Yes.
It looks so dumb. It's funny, but I just imagine that, like, the three heads of the Fox sisters being put on one of these jib jab videos, dancing around and rapping. Also, Joe in the background, hyping them up.
Please put me on the DJ booth, just like doing the arbitrary, like, wicka, wicka, wicka on the record.
You're the hype man, Joe.
Oh my God, I love it. You know what? I'm changing careers again.
Yeah, you know what? Me too. I'll join you.
Okay, so Maureen heads to another designer, Vincent, and he really wants her to try on the clothes. Like, he is egging her on, even though this is where we learn she has tried it before, and he told Kira, and she got into
he dicked her over, she said.
That's something, too, because like we haven't officially met Kira yet, and we will slowly learn that she is the Miranda Priestley of the movie. The first telltale sign, by the way, is so... We don't meet Kira, but earlier in the film, she goes and she sees a letter from Kira that's like, hey, I'm already in Milan, blah, blah, blah. Oh, also, can you do my Mac update for me? Thanks, bye.
Yeah. It's just like, sure, I guess I'm also your personal assistant. I need to remind you about your finances, so I guess I'm your personal banker. Just, yeah, she takes no shortage of shit from this woman.
But it establishes, so she tries on the boots in this scene with Vincent, and this establishes, like, this is... as we will learn later in the film, forbidden, and it's dangerous, and it's sexy.
Yes, all of that. And of course, it also contributes to this idea of doubling and personal insecurity, like, who am I, that the film really wants to investigate. So I'm going to bring back in Barnett. Mm-hmm. So Maureen is continually subjected to her own mirror image, though she is prohibited by Kira from trying on the clothes, shoes, and accessories she buys and borrows. The sales assistants are frequently persuasive. More than once, Maureen is cajoled into donning designer garments and confronted by the resulting reflection. There is a sense here that Maureen is trying on not only a different set of clothes, but a different identity, someone that she and Lewis might struggle to recognize.
Well, do y'all think that Maureen doesn't have a sense of identity for herself? I know, like, it's hard for us to peg her down because the film doesn't give us that much information in terms of expository dialogue. Mm-hmm. But do you think Maureen has an identity crisis? Or maybe the loss of her brother triggered an identity crisis. Like, who is she without her brother?
Just this type of connection with the twins and the fact that they made a promise and they were both mediums. Yep. They both shared a heart defect. Like, I think that there is a part of this that's about the existential kind of tailspin you go in after the loss of someone who you felt so deeply connected to the point that it's like, oh, I've lost part of myself. And so I think that's why she is kind of aimlessly doing this work that she doesn't really care about. And she even talks to Ingo about it. Like, and he's trying to get her, oh, I could get you a job in this magazine. And she's like, yeah, I don't, that's not free. Do they get to select their subjects? Do they get to pick their projects? No. Well, then I don't have an interest in that. So it's kind of like, there are parts of her that you can recognize are very like solidified. And then there are parts of her that are very much like still kind of floating in the ether, trying to figure out where she fits and kind of what her purpose is.
But that's why I think her age is actually really important, because she's at that point where you could take your career in a bunch of different directions. And she's clearly, as you said, Ari, she's very firm on certain subjects, or she's very passionate. She's very strong-willed, but she also seems very unmoored. We're using the word liminal in this discussion. And I think she is living in that in-between space, right? Which is a great description for grief as well, because you just have to sit in it. There isn't a firm way out, which is very much like the spirit world. It's intangible. You don't quite know what to make of it or how to find your way through.
Yeah, this is definitely liminal horror. Like, just kind of thematically, these in-between spaces, the discomfort there, the fear there sometimes, and then whenever you see something or notice something that is familiar, maybe that's hopeful, maybe that's comforting, but then you question, like, well, is this what I actually am seeing? It's just kind of, there are all of these threats to kind of this reality in front of you at every turn, and which is probably really destabilizing, on top of the fact of this girl could die at any point. This woman could die moment. Because, it could, like the doctor says to her, you could be when you're 90, it could be like next week or whatever. So there's so much of that I think is part of this, what's going on inside of her. Is it the fear, the anxiety around death potentially happening at any moment, like it did to her brother? What is her career doing? She's not happy in it. When people ask you, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm waiting. So it's like she is in this liminal space. It's like being in like the waiting room of the DMV, forever. It's that purgatory feeling.
Well, I love too that, when she does have this doctor's appointment, and we learn that Lewis, her twin, had the same condition, died very suddenly, very unexpectedly, and she gets this unhelpful strategy of just avoid extreme physical exertions and emotions. It's like, basically just don't live. Don't do anything, and you may be fine, but I can't guarantee it.
I'm surprised she doesn't have more anxiety in this film, because if it was like one of those things where it's like, yeah, you could live till you're 90, but you also might die tomorrow. Like, that really is a thing for everybody, but given her heart condition, it's like, oh, I feel like I'd be very anxious like all the time.
Well, I think I would argue that the film maybe is kind of showing a lot of her trying to keep it together, and like really strong arming her way through probably these general fears and anxieties, because there is kind of a sense of urgency, or like holding on to this dream of, if only he can tell me there's something else, then maybe this would be less scary, and I think that that's a big part of the tension in the film that isn't overtly stated, but I think you can pick up on it at different times.
Well, I think it also helps to explain, and this is not me apologizing if people don't like Stewart or don't like her performance in this film, but Maureen is a relatively calm, sort of almost subdued character a lot of the time, right? Like she doesn't have histrionic outbursts. She has 2 moments where she gets very scared. One is when she sees the ghost and she runs out of the house, and the other is when she gets the phone off of airplane mode and all the texts come crawling in, right?
We'll talk about that scene, don't worry.
But like so much of this does feel like she's trying to keep herself under control so as to not exacerbate her heart condition. And it's ironic, Trace. I didn't think we were going to bring up Les Diaboliques in this episode because for once in the last couple of weeks, we didn't get the filmmaker saying it was a reference.
Yeah.
But it does feel like that character in Diabolique where it's like, oh, you've got the weak heart. All I need to do is scare you once to get you to die.
Yep. There's not enough scared to deaths in films.
Right.
But so since we're on the exam scene, I do want to point out, so this is the first of 2 topless scenes that Kristen Stewart has in the film. And
unexpected.
I know. So I found an interview with her in W Magazine from this time, 2016, where they asked her, were you apprehensive about the nudity in the film? And it's a little lengthy answer, but bear with me because I think it's a very insightful one, especially into the year of our Lord 2024, where I feel like sex and nudity is coming under fire from people who say it's not necessary in films.
Wow, go away, those people.
Kristen Stewart's reply to this. I wasn't apprehensive. I feel super great with director Olivier Assayas as well. The scenes in which I don't have clothes on, or the scenes that seem risque from an outsider's perspective, there was no acknowledgement on his part. They're very fucking French. We are weirder about shit like that. You kind of have to take yourself personally out of it. My personal feeling about that is that I'm really unashamed. But within the context of the story, there's a lot of shame. Maureen lives and breathes fucking shame and guilt. And so it's kind of nice to see someone stripped and bare. Totally bare. There's strength in it. There's an aspect of sexuality in the movie that's so lonely, and that is just one of the saddest things. She's not with anyone. Like the sex scene, which I think she's referring to the masturbation scene, totally alone. She's interacting with a fake person on a phone, and there's just something so fucking raw about it. And without that stuff, it would be a different thing. I think people are way, way, way too precious about that. It is precious. That's probably the wrong word to use.
No, I actually think that's the exact right word to use.
Yeah. And then she concludes, it should be a precious thing. I don't want to desexualize it in some way, but at the same time, I'm not weird about it. I'm pretty open. I think people are a little too fucking weird about it, to be honest, but that's kind of why I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah, I love her willingness to go there. She's and that's how I felt too, actually, when I watched this. Every time I watch it, I mean, again, like there's just something so this is part of the daily routine, like changing and putting on this, dress or trying on clothing. Like, of course, you're a personal shopper and it's like, whatever. When you're at a fashion show, you're changing. You don't care about modesty and like, oh, I got to cover my bits and stuff. It's like, no, you got to change. You got to get into the next outfit and get back in line and go down the runway. So it's like, there's elements of this that are either like very much that, like part of a professional process that she's used to, or like, the medicalized version of it. She's going in to get her heart checked, of course,
right.
So like none of that even read to me like as I guess, and I think it's probably because with distance from Twilight, this is not as, a big deal, so to speak, for her. But maybe it was a bigger deal the closer in proximity to Twilight because she's beloved, she was beloved by all these, the Twilight fans and kind of has this like wide age range of supporters because of that. And so, Kristen Stewart's nude. And again, I think maybe she's gone nude before this too. So,
because in my mind, I'm like, well, Twilight's 2008. It was a long time ago, but I guess I forget there's, 5 movies in that franchise. So Breaking Dawn Part 2 would have been 2012 and Clouds of Sils Maria was 2014.
Right. I mean, I think the other piece is that she's a figure of huge celebrity, right? Ari, you said she's got all these Twilight fans. She's accrued the fans from other films. So this is a figure of celebrity. And I think sometimes we forget by putting them on pedestals, they still have human bodies. They're still human beings. Like, Kristen Stewart has breasts, and I appreciate the fact that she doesn't want to sensationalize it, because you're right. When you go in to go and see a doctor, they're not going to make a big deal. They're going to say, take your top off. I need to check your heart for this. But this is almost the duality that we experience as an audience member, where we're watching a character in a very innocuous, very mundane scene where it makes sense to be topless, but we're also seeing a figure of extreme celebrity very raw and vulnerable on the screen, and we think, oh God, there's going to be all these fucking assholes who screenshot this and wank to it and submit it to sites, and it's going to live forever on the internet. But like, you have to simultaneously process that.
But I like her saying, even just in the realm of this particular film, this character is someone who has a lot of shame and guilt. And so in these moments of nudity, she doesn't exhibit those feelings of shame and guilt. She is just in her natural element. So I think, again, if you're saying, oh, well, is it really necessary to show her tits out in this medical exam scene? Can't you just have her talking to the doctor afterwards? But I think, again, thematically, it is necessary to show her in a place where she's not shameful.
Right. Yeah. Like, she's concerned about other things, not her tits.
I love that, too, because every time there is a nude scene, which, again, I think even just the fixation of, like, this discussion of it feels very American too, or very, like Western. Yep. Because again, like, I think if you just kind of are watching this in the context of the world in which Maureen lives, it's European and like nudity. It's whatever, man. Their breasts,
not a big deal. Not
whatever.
Big deal.
So, but I think that, that piece of things of the vulnerable, like the contrast between she is more vulnerable on her phone in a train, and more terrified than she is when she's, changing in front of someone, or, fully exposed and for a camera and getting a medical exam. So that is the contrast between those moments, which we would typically view as being especially vulnerable. It's actually not in this. It's the other moments where she's kind of emotionally laying herself out and talking about her shame that are more vulnerable.
Yeah. So why don't we talk a bit more about this scene that introduces Ingo, who is played by Lars Eidinger. And we also meet Kira in this scene eventually. She's played by Nora Waldstatten. So Kira has returned to Paris. She's taking this call about her gorilla sanctuary. And Ingo, we learn, is a Men's Vogue correspondent and Kira's secret boyfriend of 2 years. And yeah, he tries to recruit Maureen to come and work on a fashion magazine, and he's pretty aggressive. There is definitely a sexual vibe between the two of them, but this is also where we get a lot of exposition backstory on Maureen, her relationship with Louis, how they were both mediums, and how she's waiting for a sign.
Yes, so we learned they made an oath before he died, and that whoever died first would send them a sign. And I think the first time I watched this was kind of a thing where I was kind of taken aback is the wrong phrase, but it's a thing where getting into a world where people just believe in spiritualism like this, and it's like, oh, it's just a fact of life, was taking me. It took me a while to wrap my head around it, to be like, wait, why are they talking like this? This isn't how real people talk. But again, I mean, it is how some real people talk. Obviously.
I was going to say, this is how I imagine you and Ari just talk around the house all the time.
Maybe me, not him.
But I think when you're walking into a supernatural film, you have an idea of what the world of the film is going to be like, and maybe this is a basic example, but something like The Exorcist, something like The Conjuring, and this film, as Assayas wanted to do, takes a distinctly European approach to it instead, which I think is why it takes me a while to like reposition myself into the mindset of this film.
Well, it's so grounded too, right? Like we will get a scene with ghosts, and I think it's very different from the rest of the film because it suddenly does feel more akin to what we expect from a genre movie. But up until this point, this is a drama. This is real people just living in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually was going to say this earlier too, but I love how the film just kind of launches in and it's like kind of established that this discussions around spirituality and the afterlife are within these circles.
They're routine.
Not atypical. Yeah, they're not freaky, weird, othery things. It's just kind of part of, the general discussion culturally.
Maybe that's distinctly European as well.
Maybe. Yeah.
Just a little more open-minded. So Maureen rides her motorcycle through Paris. This is where we get all of those beautiful hidden camera shots, I'm assuming. And then she heads back to Lewis's house and she sketches in her book for a little bit. We get a visit from Jerome and Cassandra to make sure that Maureen is still at peace and okay with the plans that they're going to make. And Laura reassures them that, yeah, she's totally fine. She understands what's going on. But that night, Maureen is still wandering in the dark. She's looking for signs. And this is where we start to get the first really spooky supernatural stuff. So we've got faucets that appear to have turned on by themselves. And Maureen starts to get upset. She calls on Lewis. She says, it's not enough. I need more than fucking plumbing. Prove to me that you are here. Show me a sign of the afterlife.
You know, maybe that is something they should have discussed. You know, hey, what kind of sign are you going to send me so I know to look for that?
Let's discuss that, Trace. Like we can make our own decision there too.
I know.
If one of us passes.
Ari's going to send you a jib jab video of the Fox sisters rapping, and that's how you will know.
That's my sign. Check your email.
We'll have a tier. No, because we don't know. You know what a spirit or a force like that can manipulate. So we'll have to have a tier list. Okay, when you die, your first choice will be knock on the wall. If you can't do that, the second choice will be leaky faucet.
Right.
Works for me.
I mean, it's important that this house looks old and decrepit. Like, it is definitely run down. So the idea that a faucet would just be dripping by itself or have bad plumbing, It seems possible, but at the same time, the fact that we're turning off one and then it seems like another one is going full force upstairs, to me, that would confirm, oh yeah, something or someone is manipulating this. So then we come downstairs and we see that her sketch pad is all scratched up. There's marks on the table. And then, oh shit, there's like a lady ghost hanging up by the chandelier, vomiting ectoplasm.
So the design of this ghost is specifically modeled after pictures, those 19th century pictures of ghosts like in seances in those photographs.
And it looks great.
Well, because when you say ectoplasm, like, it doesn't look like, again, I think about Ghostbusters when you tell me like ectoplasm, like slimy grossness. And I like that it's not that.
I mean, it's still a little gross, but
yeah, I mean, it's vomit.
But it's like, I think like the misty kind of translucent effect makes it. I don't know. It looks cool. It looks less hokey, even though the moment itself could feel like just kind of really ridiculous out of a different type of movie. For whatever reason, it just kind of works here. And again, I think it's because of the Assayas' eye and his attention to the shifts in genre being just really kind of delicate and thoughtful. But I just love that we get this. Like, this is just straight up like, okay, if you were bored until now, here you go. Here's a ghost. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that we say this is the 40 minutes into the movie. It's not even like a third act reveal, but it's not her brother. It's a woman ghost.
Yeah. All right, so this freaks Maureen out. She does run from the house. And I like even that we get this almost POV shot of her running as though we could be something that's watching her from inside, but you don't know.
Well, we're the ghosts. We're the viewer is the unseen entity in a film.
Truly.
Yeah.
So she ends up going to London via the Eurostar train the next day. And this is when we move into the next phase of the film, because she begins receiving text messages from an unknown person. And this individual seems to know her or can see her. And we basically begin a round of Guess Who.
Two things. One is a question. One is a reading. I don't know if this is how Kristen Stewart texts or this was a conscious character choice on Horror Assayas' part. Why does she have a space between the punctuation mark and the last letter of a sentence?
I knew that was going to come up for some reason.
I saw that and I was like, maybe it was a typo, but then she keeps doing it.
She keeps doing it. Yeah. I have to assume it's a character choice.
Yeah. But I will bring in, so this is actually from the Criterion leaflet. It's from an essay called Freedom 2016 written by Glenn Kenny. And what he says, though, when we introduce the texting part of this movie, he says, Assayas' interest in the ways technology affects behavior and communication extends into what he has called the invisible world. We use something called Wi-Fi to connect our devices to the wider world, and we text with our smartphones, sending our disembodied voices through the air in a process most of us really have no understanding of. We trust that the person we think we are communicating with really is that person. Our trust in technology sometimes resembles ardent religious faith. In this atmosphere, perhaps, the idea of a ghost in the machine or in the cloud becomes more plausible, more accessible.
That's so cool. And I think that gets at more too, like How do we view the things that are like our understanding of the world through science and technology right now, but also through the lens of how can these things begin to help us understand or get closer to understanding the things that we don't see in our experiences, the vibes that we feel, the chill that you feel, the weird thing that you saw kind of move out of the corner of your eye. So I like that it's bringing this into the sphere of technology, because I do think that, at some point, in my lifetime, that would be great, but that there will be ways of kind of seeing things that we don't normally see and understanding them more, so that way they're just as commonplace, as what we can, currently see.
I think because for people who maybe aren't able to wrap their heads around the concept of a spirit world or what that is, I think the comparison to technology is a good foot in the door to help people understand or again comprehend that.
Well, it's wild too that we pretend like, oh, well, it's something I can hold in my hand or I can see for myself, and therefore it is real, as though any of us understand how technology truly works. Like, tell me, how does Wi-Fi work? How do you build a computer? Like, some people for sure are going to know the answer, but most of us just pick up the technology and use it because we don't actually fucking care.
I think about all the time, like building a computer chip, and I was like, but how do you make it turn on?
Where does the energy come from? I don't get it.
Well, I think though, like, the bigger thing here too is like when we think of sound waves, like talking, like what is actually sound waves, like the idea of vibrations. These are things, gravity, like these are things that we believe in and understand, contextually for the most part how it works, but couldn't probably explain it. We can't see it. There are tools to measure those things. And I think this is very similar. It's kind of like, what is the wavelength? What is the frequency? What is the channel that is necessary to better visualize like the things that are unknown, unseen? Because as much as we pretend like, oh, this idea of something we're not seeing moving, something that's ghostly, that's crazy, it actually is really not uncommon in our world to trust and believe in things that we don't see, and just believe that that's just how it works. That's just normal.
But I think that's because I feel like when people think about the study of the paranormal, they don't think of it as a science. And I feel like the way, especially the way we're talking about this film, it does feel like a science.
Yeah, I mean, with that piece too, like, I mean, it's like the field that I've trained in psychology. It's looked at as a soft science. The hard sciences are like the bench sciences, like math and, chemistry, like STEM essentially. So, so I think it's really funny to even acknowledge that, because even a field like psychology or sociology, like they're not looked at like pseudoscience, but it is softer sciences, meaning there's less, kind of like tangible, observable data.
Which is not true. There's so much data.
Which there is, but again, like we think of data. I mean, again, if you're thinking purely scientific, it's kind of like these, we can see these shifts in this and these outcomes, or we can physically see something, like visually see something. And there's just less of that whenever you're talking about internal psychological experiences. You can see like brain scans and stuff like that, but it just has a different quality, I think, than, look, if we put this medication on this rash or whatever over time, if we were to do like a time lapse, we can see how it improves it. So it's something that you can visually see. Thinking like when you have a headache, you take if you take a painkiller, you don't see how it works. You just know there's an association there. So I think it's just that piece of things of like, it's easier to classify things as science whenever we have more, I guess like hard evidence, so to speak, of the outcomes and what we're actually testing.
I just love it too, because if folks have not seen this film, texting is a hugely integral part of the film.
It's like nonstop texting from here to the end of the movie.
I can't think of another film I've seen that uses texting and even like insert shots to such a high degree. And there's something to be said for the way it's not just woven in to advance the narrative, but what it tells us about the character as well, right? Like, Maureen is such an isolated character, as we've already mentioned. She's living in this liminal zone. She does a ton of texting as she is quite literally in transit in a liminal space underwater between Paris and London on this Eurostar train. And we feel like she is making an actual connection to this mysterious person because of the texting, because we see the phone, we see the messages, but also the film wants us to question, is she fucking texting a ghost?
Yeah.
Do y'all have an answer for that? Because the film doesn't give us an explicit one, unless we're led to believe that it's Ingo who's doing this.
I think the easy answer is that it is Ingo, but that's also not a gimme. The film doesn't literally say, oh, Ingo was the one who was doing this to you. We just know because of the resolution of the murder mystery that it is him. We can default double back and say, oh, well, it must have been him doing the texting. But the film doesn't say that.
I will say, too, though, so on that interview in the Criterion, Assayas says that even after they wrap production, he was still tweaking with the text messages in the film. Like, I imagine they all said some version of the same thing, which is because Stewart has to have that to act appropriately. But yeah, he said like up until like it's screening, he was like tweaking all the text messages.
It's so tense.
Oh my gosh, it's like just a new type of scare that I hadn't up to this point really. But, you know, it's kind of an extension of like the Scream opening phone call, or like when a stranger calls back, you know, like that unknown person you're communicating with. And I love the use of, you know, the text in this way, also because you get a sense of like, oh, and with regard to text, I did actually find an answer for the space. So it's this AI assistant said in some languages, such as French, a space before certain punctuation marks is standard practice.
Okay, so we're back to European
so
slash
might be
French.
A French thing, yeah.
There we go. But she's not French.
But she's been living there. She's adopting customs. Like, whatever, man. Like, you let people live. Let her put a space.
Trace, it's another example of liminality, right? She's half American, half French in the way that she does her punctuation and texting.
Existing, well, yeah, because she uses the letter R for the word R.
But like this, like I just love this idea of like seeing that this moment of tension and all that unfold slowly, and then you see it affecting her emotionally through her like her thumb shaking, just like holding on that as she's typing, you know, afraid to send, or how she deletes certain things, or it's just so part of it feels like a little bit like that Screen Life type of movies when you see someone, you know, typing a message, deleting it, and you see how they tweak it. Kind of you get an insight into how what their mind's thinking. And so there's lots of that here that I think he plays with so effectively.
Ari, that is it. I said earlier, I can't think of another film that does it this well or this much. And you're right. It's those two Screen Life movies. What is it? Missing and...
Oh, I mean, actually, and a lot of others do it. Like Unfriended does it.
Right.
Unfriended, Dark Web, all the Bazilovs, I guess, all those movies that they've produced. But yeah, like Missing and Searching, things like that.
There we go. Yeah, it's just interesting because as someone who didn't really have a sense of what the film was going to do or what kind of story it was telling, I was not prepared for this much sort of insert texting stuff in the film.
Yeah. It's a big chunk of it. Like
it's a huge chunk. So she's taking these messages, you know, as I said, I jokingly said, oh, it's like a game of Guess Who, because she's very much, you know, who are you? Are you a man? Are you a woman? Like, do I know you? Blah, blah, blah. So it seems like she's asking 20 questions, but this takes up so much mileage that it's literally her trip to London. She stops, she gets this mirrored dress, very important that it is mirrored. And we also have see-through spaces so that you can get the halters that come in a variety of different colors. So she picks up a bunch of those. And then she gets back on the fucking train to go back to Paris the whole time texting with this person.
Could you imagine going into this job and feeling like, wow, this is going to be so exciting. I get to travel. I get to be around fashion. It's really just like glamorous. And this is really what she's doing. She's taking these long journeys to pick up expensive clothing.
Dress.
Yeah. And it's like her task for the day. And it's just kind of like, and I like how the film presents it kind of in this really banal way. Like she's just kind of going through the motions. She's good at it, but she's as bored, you know, she's visibly, you know, kind of just as disinterested as she has stated she was, you know, when she was talking to Ingo. So,
right.
Yeah, I love that. And then like, it's like in the midst of that, like whenever she does try on the harness top outfit, which I fucking love it. It's so beautiful on her.
I wanted to see the full outfit. I needed to see what this looked like.
She does it.
Yeah.
She does it in the movie.
I'm glad we get there eventually.
Yeah.
Because when they were describing it, I was like, oh, I need to see this. I don't understand.
And she wears it appropriately because initially when she tries it on, she puts it on over her her t-shirt. But later she does put on the whole thing. with the sheer over it. And it's just beautiful. But yeah, it's like that. But when she's doing that, she like tells the stylist or whatever to wait. And so she can respond to so she can read the text from this mystery person.
Yes.
And all that. It's just like that's taking her attention more than like being in this fashion world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the dress is really pretty. The halters come in a bunch of different colors, but also I might be talking to my ghost brother and I need to get that text.
Exactly.
I know. That's the thing, I mean, and that's the other thing, though. Whether this is a ghost or not, I don't think it's her brother.
No.
Like, this person's too antagonistic to be her brother.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is an open question as to whether we ever see Lewis. I suggested earlier that we see him in the cottage, but since we never see a picture of him, we don't actually know if that's him or that is just some other ghost.
Right.
Which I think is a very deliberate choice on behalf of the film. Like, we learned that they're twins. Obviously, they're not going to be identical because they are fraternal, but it also means that we have no idea what Lewis actually looks like.
Yeah, and what I really like about this too is just the general message of like, even if there were proof, so to speak. So if you saw this figure floating or this figure moving, holding a glass, and then it disappears or whatever, if you heard the rapping, you saw the ghost thing. That's not the final answer of anything because we don't understand, okay, how were you able to see it? So there's always more to learn. So it's kind of like that say, which is why I think it should be beliefs and things like the supernatural or things that maybe we aren't accustomed to viewing as part of our actual reality, by and large. There has not like, quote unquote, hard evidence of life after death, etc. But I think it's this idea around kind of just generally learning and knowledge and acknowledging the limitations of what you can observe and what you currently know, that it really is telling, like, even with that kind of stuff, we still wouldn't know a lot about this. And so it's like the more I learn, the less I know, which I love that. I think that keeps you really humble if you look at a lot of aspects of the world that way and things that you don't understand. As opposed to kind of this arrogant view of, as a human, thinking, oh, we're the most important things in the world. Everything we know now is it's reality and it'll always be reality. It's like, no, like with time, we can learn more and it can change everything that you thought you knew about reality in retrospect. So I think it's more of like, do you want to take that? Are you comfortable taking this approach to life where you assume that you're going to be able to understand everything that's happening and nothing's going to be shocking and surprising? Or are you comfortable with this idea of you may encounter things you don't understand, but hopefully one day there will be a way for us to understand what those things were? So I don't know. That's my tangent about that. Cause I just really feel like there's, I guess like this inherent arrogance in a lot of people that what's out there is it, that's what we know. That's the reality. I'm like, there's so much we don't know and can't explain that if we were to be able to have the language or have the tools available to explain it, your view of what's possible in the world would drastically change.
And of course, if there were ghosts, they would just naturally have to fit into our world and our perception of it. Otherwise, how would we compute?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump to this scene. We talked about how she tries on the garment when she gets back to Kira's. So let's talk about this moment because we mentioned earlier there's the moment where Kristen Stewart is topless at the doctor's office, but this is a more extended period of nudity as she tries on this dress with the harness underneath. And I think that this scene is fascinating for what it doesn't say. It just lets the viewer understand it. And it'd be so easy to misread this as, oh, she's a little bit jealous. She wants the fantasy of trying on Kira's outfit. But even the way that Stewart decides how to play this moment with the framing of the nudity and the putting on of the clothes and then the taking of the picture and so on, it's so deliberate.
Can you elaborate on that? Like what makes it feel deliberate to you?
So I ended up watching the same interview as you, Trace, from this Criterion, and Assayas really gives Stewart a lot of praise for the way that she's not just comfortable, but, he didn't direct her. He said, do it and I will just run it. You know, obviously there's the moment where she walks out of frame when she's sort of like mid-dress. But apart from that, he just said, do it the way that you want to play it. And so you can see almost the creative acting choices that she's making about, okay, I'm going to put on this other woman's underwear. Like she initially goes to put on the harness, but then she decides she'd rather put on the transparent or the see-through mesh bra. And I just found it really fascinating about, it has that element of fantasy. It has that element of dress up, but also it really does feel, I don't know. It's hard to put into words. I guess I was just struck by the decision to let us watch this from a not voyeuristic perspective, but it feels like it's really informing how I understand Maureen as a character.
I like that you say it's not exactly voyeuristic, because I feel like a scene like this could feel, I mean, again, we're just watching a woman take her top off and try on clothes, but it doesn't feel like I credit this to the camera work as well. Like it's almost like we're at a distance, which again, by just fact of being viewers of a movie, that we are at a distance, but there's something slightly detached, but not about the way this is shot.
Yeah, I feel like that, like it does toe that line in a way between the voyeurism and actually just feeling what it feels like to be in her position of like, you know, even because she says, if it's not forbidden, I don't want to do it. You know, It's just kind of like, this is her another hit of that high, of that peak in her otherwise very monotone life at this point. And so she's looking for those moments. And in those moments is when she feels the most vulnerable. And so, or where she presents as the most vulnerable, because she's giving into things that are quote unquote shameful to her, or that are forbidden. And so I really like without that context, this would feel, I think, especially voyeuristic, but within it, it's like we're watching her totally get her high from this forbidden thing, which is what, you know, it kind of is like that. I don't know. It's like, it's just so different from the world, from the life that she's normally leading, that it's like a necessary moment for us to see for this character, so we can see her come to life a bit more within this context of shame, but like also owning it.
And this kind of, I mean, this is a big scene for Maureen as a character, because, I mean, I love how, because she feels the most honest with her mysterious texter. You know, she's like, I did it. He, they, it, she replies, you're scared. Yeah, I am. Like, I just feel like that's more information we get from her from any of her spoken dialogue. But
then she masturbates too.
Well, so that's what I was going to say though. She that high Ari was talking about, like, she wears these clothes and goes to masturbate in Kira's bed, which I feel like this is the most liberating moment Maureen has in the film.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely had to, I think I actually hit pause literally on the movie just to think about what the moment meant, because part of me was trying to figure out, okay, is this voyeurism? Is this provocative? You know, it turns out this is the only moment of sexuality that we get from Maureen. And, you know, we've not said, obviously, we're covering this film in part because Stewart is queer in real life. So we've got a central queer actor leading the film. But I'm fascinated with, like, this is the only instance of sexuality in the film. We will learn that Maureen has this relationship with this guy in Omen, but they literally don't share any scenes together. Like, they're completely separated, mediated by technology. Even when she arrives in Oman, he's not there. Like, she has to go and meet him, and he's still not there. And I don't get a romantic connection. Like, if the film had said, oh, they're friends, and she just goes to meet him, I would have believed it. So this feels, it's not asexual, but it is single-minded towards her own pleasure. And I thought that was really fascinating as well.
Yeah, it's like this entity, whatever this texter is telling her, like, it's okay for you to lean into doing something for you. Because it's kind of like actually really hopeful in the context of her story with Lewis, of waiting. And it's really kind of Lewis's move. You know, she's waiting for him to give a sign. And this thing is saying, it's okay to actually move on and live your own life and do things that you enjoy. Why are you still doing these really mundane things that don't bring you passion? Like, dip into the forbidden a little bit. Why not? You know, everything else in your life is so, so one note.
It's the only thing she's living for, right? Yeah. It's the only spark of passion we've seen from her this entire film.
Yeah.
So she does end up getting freaked out because we hear something on the soundtrack that is very similar to the sound effect that we heard when she actually saw the ghost girl in Lewis's house. So we don't see anything, but she does get scared and she ends up leaving. And she also gets a address, and the address leads her to a locker. Inside the locker is a key card that will come into effect later. Woo. She ends up going to see Laura, and it's kind of just what you said, Ari, where Laura says, hey, I don't really know how to say this, but I can't mourn Lewis anymore. So this was actually our confirmation that Laura is Lewis's ex-girlfriend. And she has met somebody, so she's not prepared to stop living. She wants to move on and be with this new dude.
This new dude, by the way, is the actor from The Worst Person in the World.
Oh, is that who it is? Mm-hmm. I thought he looked very familiar.
Yeah.
I love that moment, because it is kind of an explicit echo of that other message that the texture is doing. Also, like, it feels at different times like the texture could be different people if we want to take it there. Like, it could be, the guy who's trying to goad her into trying on Kira's clothing to get her in trouble. It could be Ingo. It could be, there are different ways of thinking about it. Obviously, it's not as like, on the nose as like a Knives Out or something, but it's definitely this, there are these little suggestions, these little wisps of, oh, what if this or that? So your mind can kind of go to all those places, which I think, Assayas really handles in such a very masterful way. But I love that because it's ultimately, it could be Laura, it could be, who knows, based on this, but it's like this, I would say to a degree, this texture is like encouraging her to live for her, to move on, to, put these other things to rest that that are either holding her back from living her own life, or that she just genuinely doesn't care about, which would be more so her personal shopping gig. But,
right.
But I love seeing her just kind of be like, or Laura saying, I can't keep doing this all the time in my life. Like, I refuse to do that. I want to be happy.
It's admittedly a bit confronting too, right? There's an undertone in the way that Laura says it that suggests, I can't be like you.
Yes.
I need to do this for me. And I'm just like, ooh, okay. I guess it seems harsh without actually being harsh.
But it doesn't come across as condescending, I don't
Very
think.
European.
I don't think she's saying, like, you're doing it wrong, I need to do it the right way and move on.
Well, yeah, she's saying, I need to do this for me, but also the insinuation is you could stand to think the same thing.
Yeah, no, I think so too, actually, Joe, whenever, like, even this time watching it, whenever I saw that, or whenever that moment came up and she says it, it's almost like she's preemptively being like, oh, I just can't do this. Like, don't argue back with me. I need to move on. I can't do what you're doing. Like, she's assuming maybe the arguments that Maureen would present. And I love that Maureen doesn't. Like, Maureen takes it very gracefully. But it's like, it's this, this feeling of there's an urgency there. Like, she's just trying to say, I need to get this out because I can't walk on these eggshells anymore.
Right. Yeah. So in her woodshop, Laura tells Maureen about this Victor Hugo, he was a spiritualist and he did this whole thing. And hey, they even made this hokey 60s movie about it that you can watch on YouTube. So of course, like we did with Off Clint, we go and we watch it. And this will be helpful in terms of narrative so that we can learn about the rapping. And so Maureen watches the movie. I love that so much of the movie we're watching is very serious. It's very grounded. And then we have to watch this really hokey looking shit movie.
Yeah.
And obviously we had to make this fake movie. So I love that stylistic difference.
Yeah, same.
But so as she's finishing this movie, Maureen does put on the silver mirror dress, which is stunning. And it feels like something that Kristen Stewart would actually wear herself in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And there's a shot where she's walking around the room in the daylight and you just see it's like a disco ball in the room.
It is, really. In dress form.
Yeah, dress form, yes.
So she goes to the hotel room that she received the mysterious key card for. And when she's there, there's nobody in the room, but the texter wants her to send a picture. So she does. And this is when she says that she's ashamed and she doesn't really know why she came. So this is her testing the boundaries of what she's comfortable with. You know, Laura said, hey, you've got to live your life. We've already tried on the clothes a couple of times. We masturbated, but she's not ready to take the full step forward and say, okay, I'm going to start living for me. Like, this is a scary thing.
Right. Well, it's about to get scarier for her.
Yeah. So she goes to the lobby and she asks, you know, hey, who rented this room? But she can't get any answers. It's in her name and the room was paid for in cash. So no answers. The movie is still not giving us any kind of proof as to who this mysterious individual is. But we should note that after this, she immediately goes to Cartier so that she can grab shoes and jewelry. And I didn't mention it earlier, but when she's on the train back from London with this dress, there's a moment where she steps out of the car that she was in so that she can take a call from Kira. And she comes back and the bag with the dress is still there. But I just keep waiting throughout this entire movie for moments where she picks up these hugely expensive items to then have them go missing. So when she picks up, you know, what?
Tiffany's.
Like $80,000 worth of jewelry. I was just like, oh, fuck. Are we going to have these things get stolen or something happen to them? And we kind of do.
Yeah.
Okay. So Maureen lets herself into Kira's place and, hey, in case you didn't think so, we're watching a fucking horror movie because Kira's body is splatter movie, gory blood spread all over the bathroom. And maybe there's a light or someone at the end of the hall, and it's scary.
It's very scary. But I think what I love most about the scene, though, is Kristen Stewart's reactions feel so authentic. You know, and like what happens is she leaves. She leaves the apartment, gets on her scooter, drives away, and then realizes, wait, what am I doing? Drives back to call the police. And I feel like that's such a natural reaction to, I mean, again, I've never walked in on a corpse, but I would imagine you would be in shock.
Yeah. She's not behaving rationally.
Yeah, I love it. I love that, like, because there's so much about this whole thing that it feels very, like, naturally irrational given the shock. And even like when she goes to the police station and they're like, you checked your email last night and this morning. Did you stay the night there with the dead body or where someone had just died essentially? And then she's like, yeah, I guess I did. Why didn't you tell us? I was, what did she say? Something like stupid mistake or something. Like just the way she acknowledges this, I think is so believable and authentic. I'm like, good for you. You're not freaking out here. You know, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just in shock.
Well, she can't afford to get too scared because she might just die.
Exactly.
Or she might go to jail for this murder because these cops are not nice to her.
Oh, 100%. They do not believe her at all. This police officer who's played by Hamu Greya, you can tell the line of questioning is, so you're the personal shopper. Explain this to me. Why are you trying on the clothes? Why are you using the personal computer? Why are you staying in her bed? Like, you can see the line of questioning is very, did you murder your boss because you wanted to take over her life? But it's so fantastic because we know that that is not the case. Like, she made one series of mistakes for the first time ever. Well, and it just happened to coincide with the dates of the murder.
And I've never even thought about it this way, but let's say we want to take the easy explanation and say that this texter is Ingo. Then that means he's been doing these things to make her try on these clothes to make her more of a target in the police investigation. So
he was always going to pin it all on her.
100%. But and the big tell though for me, where I sometimes I do lean to the whole, this is clearly Ingo, is the texter asked her, did you tell the police about our texts?
Yes. Yeah. You're telling on yourself right now.
Like, it's the first moment of legitimate worry from the texter.
Yeah. And I think too, because he does have a knowledge of her belief in, you know, or like what she's currently there for, you know, with waiting for the sign from her dead brother.
So he's exploiting it.
Yeah. So I could see, again, I will just say, I can see that being an argument for him being the one behind it. And there are just other things that are just kind of weird and inexplicable to me that are...
Well, they defy explanation.
Yeah.
Because as we were talking about with Greta, when you hinted that the film was going to go in this direction in Personal Shopper, Trace, you mentioned, there's an almost supernatural element because the texter in this film seems to know so much about her that Ingo didn't know, right? Like, how does he know where she is?
Right.
And we don't know. And that lends us to believe, well, maybe there is something supernatural or otherworldly about who this person is. It doesn't seem like it's a human being. She doesn't seem to be followed by Ingo.
I mean, it feels realistic. We'll get to it when we get to the doors that open by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I think it mirrors reality. You know, it's something where you could look at something and say, oh, yeah, that's clearly supernatural. Or someone else could look at it and say, well, no, this is the logical explanation for it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So the final question that she had at the police station was, hey, you said that you picked up a bunch of Cartier jewelry worth thousands of dollars. Was that still in the apartment when you left? And we all have to realize, oh, I can't remember. Where is the jewelry? Oh, fuck.
And she doesn't remember either. But she thinks she left. She says, oh, yeah, I left it there. It must still be there.
Yeah, so proof that she is definitely being set up as a fall person is when she goes back to her apartment and the Cartier jewelry is at her house.
Mm-hmm. But this is when we get what I'm going to say is one of the scariest scenes of the 2010s.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So she freaks out when she sees this because obviously it means someone has been in her apartment and she hasn't had her phone on because she got upset. So she had put it on airplane mode, as we saw her do earlier. And when she takes it off, we get a flurry of text messages that were obviously, you know, we can see the timestamps. And they started hours ago, but they come all the way up to 5 minutes ago as the mysterious texter says, why aren't you coming to this hotel room? Fine, I'm going to come to you. Fine, I'm coming up the stairs. Fine, I'm coming down the hall. I'm outside your door.
So
it is so fucking good. I did not do it justice at all. You have to watch this sequence to appreciate how masterful it is.
And trust me, I tried to find just like a clip of it on YouTube, you know, personal shopper texting scene, and it doesn't seem to exist. So,
no. Well, also, personal shopper texting scene is like, oh, here's the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But yes, if you again, try to find at least this scene if you have not watched the movie, because this is...
It's so good.
It's so good.
I was just like, girl, get out of there. Molly, you endanger girl. Maureen, you endanger girl.
It is the timestamps though, right? Because when you start to see, like, because you're reading the messages, which again are like, I'm closer and closer and closer to you, but then the timestamps, it's like, oh, fuck, 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. I love this moment so much. I think about it. So whenever I've ordered from, I ordered delivery yesterday, Trace.
Your food app?
But yeah, the food app, because sometimes I don't look at it and I don't have it set to like update whatever it's in the background or whatever. So sometimes I'll open it and it'll be like, this person's picking up your order. And then you see it move really quickly and it's like 5 minutes away, 2 minutes away. They're at your front door. Your order's here. But I always think of this because
Stop
again,
threatening me.
It's so, it will forever remind me of this moment. And this truly one of, I think, the most chilling moments in any kind of film that is just really creative. You know, I love this idea as a scare.
There's no reason that this should work. It's a girl getting a series of text messages, and it is so fucking threatening.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Like, if we had been doing the Hereditaries, if the podcast existed back in 2016, 2017, this would be up for best set piece.
100%. And again, it's a way where... It doesn't feel tropey because we haven't really used texting as a scare device. I'm sure we've used it before this, but like not often. It hasn't become a trope yet.
Well, or it'd be like what Ari described earlier, right? It'd be the ghost face equivalent, you know, hey, I'm sending you a scary message. Right. Or like in Greta, I'm sending you a picture because I can see you. I don't know. This is almost an independently minded scare where it has nothing to do with Maureen. It's just this person saying, hey, I'm getting closer to you. Be ready.
Actually, I am surprised this hasn't been in a Scream film because this does feel like a prime Scream set piece, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it definitely does.
It does. So Maureen obviously bails the fuck out of there. I do love that she immediately changes her SIM card, so she's smart.
Smart move.
And then she goes back to the hotel room with the Cartier bags. And this, to me, was the most aggravating fade to black because she sets the bags down on the bed. We hear the door open. And then we fade to black.
Mm-hmm.
I am being trolled.
This is when we get a series of shots, Joe.
Yeah, so this is the definition of liminal to me, especially in this film, is we don't know if this is earlier, if this is later, if this is simultaneous, but the camera independently tracks backwards out of this hotel room, down the hall. The elevator doors open independently and we go in, and then we're in the lobby of this hotel, and we just see the front doors, which are automatic sensors, open and close, and there's nothing visible. And then we go back and we repeat this as we see Ingo come out and follow the exact same trajectory. And I think that this is the most exciting and perplexing moment in this film.
Yep. And here's the thing, because there is a logical explanation for this. You know, people can manipulate elevator doors or motion sensor doors, or they can malfunction and do this on their own. So, but you can also read this as, okay, an energy, an entity left this room and took this trajectory down, and our technology was picking up on this paranormal energy.
Yep.
Well, I also love it that we see it once with this energy, or maybe, the technology is malfunctioning, and then we just recreate it with the human body because it suggests an almost confluence of malevolence, right? Like, we're going to learn that Ingo was Kira's killer. So he's going to confess. He gets apprehended by the police. There's a shootout and everything. But the fact that we take the same trajectory suggests that the thing that has been texting with her, or this other entity that is just out there, is also maybe evil. Or maybe it's just that we're reading it like we do with film editing, where we see a baby's face and then we see a picture of an apple and we say, oh, the baby is hungry.
That's what I love about this. I like the idea of like, it's not even just like narratively within the film that the questions arise on, is it this or is it that? It is very much too like Assayas's decisions and how to show things and where to hang, you know, like kind of like there's a shot before whatever it is, the door automatically opens leaving the hotel, but it just kind of holds there in the lobby. Like you're meant to be seeing someone walk through this empty space. So it's one of the shots where nothing reacts. Like there's no automatic reaction, but it's just holding there. And I love that because it's like, okay, from a filmmaking standpoint, that suggests that we're supposed to believe something is there.
Yeah. Look for meaning. But it's very much foreshadowing, you know, in some ways, the trajectory where we see nothing, but we see all the doors open is foreshadowing what we're going to see with Ingo just moments later. But these sequences also foreshadow the role that we as an audience are expected to play as the film moves to its conclusion, which is, what do you think you've seen? And what do you actually believe? What do you make of it? This is not just voyeurism. This is now active viewing that Assayas wants from the audience, because we have to start deciding, how do we process what he's showing us? So the murder has been solved, which means that Maureen can go to Lara and explain what happened, but she still feels scared. She feels unsafe. So she ends up staying the night. And in the morning, this is when we meet Lara's new lover, Erwin, who, as you said, Trace, is played by Anders Danielsen Lai. And we get an almost reassuring moment where he says, I knew Lewis. Lewis was very intuitive. He said that you were like him, aka also a medium, and that he did believe in something. And Maureen counters this by saying, well, you just probably feel a little bit guilty, but that's okay. But she does reflect on the fact that Lewis had a moment with their mother when their mother died, where he felt like he made one final connection. And I think these moments offer a certain amount of reassurance. Yeah, because this is really the last time we'll see Maureen before she decides to move on. Yeah, and Erwin's late arrival, you know, I always think it's fascinating when a movie introduces a character in the last couple of scenes, because usually it means, ooh, here's a cameo from a star, like we're stunt casting or something, or this person is incredibly significant, because otherwise we would have met them earlier. They would have been part of the story. So I really stand up and pay attention. So the conversation with Erwin is very much, oh, you are now free. Like, the mystery has been solved. The movie is quote unquote over. And now you're free to move on. This is almost Maureen's carte blanche to say, you can finally start living. You don't have to wait anymore. Yeah, so after Irwin leaves, she's just sitting outside in the backyard of Laura's place, and we see it's not a big moment. It's not showy. We're not really drawing attention to it, but there is a man who's holding a glass, and he moves from screen right to screen left. But as he passes the middle of the screen, he briefly disappears. And then he disappears entirely, and it's just the glass floating and holding itself before it shatters on the ground.
And this is a single take. We're all seeing this from it's not even Maureen's perspective. We're just looking at Maureen in the foreground while this stuff is happening in the background in the house, mind you. And again, I think it's a thing where if you're not paying attention, you might not even notice this is happening.
Right.
I mean, this is one of your favorite things, Trace. It's something's happening in the background that the character doesn't know. But I really like this, too, because previously, if something like this had happened, Maureen would be analyzing it. She would be trying to figure out, she'd be asking Lewis, is that you, blah, blah, blah. And instead, she makes apologies for it. She makes excuses to Laura. She says, it must have been Irwin just when he came in. He probably left it on the edge and it fell over and broke.
Okay, but see, that's why I think this is Lewis and this is a sign for him, because I think he knows that if he reveals himself to her, she will never move on. So this is his way of giving her a sign without making it explicit. Hey, look, it's me, your brother, giving you a sign.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Like, she'll know in the back of her mind for the rest of her life that she was given that sign by her brother.
Yeah, I definitely think it's Lewis. I guess, like, from the beginning, I always thought that that part to me didn't feel as ambiguous, just because in that space is where she was looking for him. So, yeah, I mean, it would make sense. I mean, it was his house. So that part, I think, is kind of like the film's way of giving us a little bit of pseudo closure there, maybe. Whether it feels more for us than for her, because she doesn't see the person. So we really don't know. But it's
for us.
Yeah, but it's for us. It's for it's kind of appealing to those of us that maybe needed this to be at least some part, not super ambiguous.
I just think it's fascinating that we actually see this person. As I said earlier, we never get a picture of Lewis, so we have to default assume, or I think we just naturally default that this is Lewis. Mm-hmm. And then he disappears and we just get the hanging glass. And like the earlier scene, this is foreshadowing a similar or a dual event that will occur when she gets to Oman.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I do read it the same way. I do think that this is Lewis, but I'm fascinated with the film's, not reticence, but its unwillingness to give us anything more than that. Like, we're not going to say, that was definitely Lewis. It's very much, you got to make up your own mind. Sorry.
And that will take us into this final, which I do think, though, my read of this first scene with the glass might be undone by whatever this final scene is, if this is Lewis communicating with her in the final scene. But again, it leaves it up in the air, by the way this plays out.
Yeah, so she arrives in Oman, and she's tired, she's weary, she's taken a long time to get there, but she arrives, and unprompted, there is a glass hanging in this room, and when she spots it, it shatters on the floor in the exact same way. So we do our Victor Hugo trick, where we ask it to start rapping, and we ask a series of guess who questions, and is it Lewis? Sure, it seems like it initially, and then it becomes a little bit more malevolent, and it feels like we're back into the realm of the texter, where she doesn't feel safe anymore. So then she wraps it up by basically saying, okay, well, is it Lewis, or is it just her?
Yeah, I mean, because she goes, are you at peace? 1 knock for yes. Are you playing with me? No reply. Do you mean harm? 2 knocks for no. Who are you? No reply. But I wonder if this is why many people at Cam booed, because she says, Lewis, is it you? She doesn't wait for an answer. She immediately goes into, or is it just me? And we get the 1 knock for yes. So what is the yes replying to? Is it Lewis, or is it just her,
And then, of course, movie is over. So it's like, were you hoping for more? Sorry.
But hey, it's not a fade to black. It's a fade to white.
It is.
Oh, yeah. And I think at the end too, I remember one of the questions feeling, I don't know, Trace, if you read them like verbatim, like from the script,
I did.
the order. Yeah. Okay. So like just kind of some of the responses in the end being so confused. It's like, holy shit. Like
it feels like it's upending everything that we've just seen.
Yeah. It definitely does. It's like this idea of, it's not going to be over for her to a degree. I mean, I guess she could choose to just move on from that, knowing that this is going to be continuously confusing and hanging over her head. But it's just, but I love this ending. It's one of my favorite endings. And again, it's like one of those things that I recognize, like some endings like this, people just hate.
There's going to be a bunch of people who fucking hate this.
Yeah. I just watched something else with an ending. I just watched, I rewatched Nocturnal Animals, and the ending is just so poignant and so understated, and then it fades to black. It ends. And so I just love an ending like that where it's very intentionally poignant and just saying like, hey, this is all you're gonna get. Do with it what you will.
This isn't even a lack of closure, right? This is, you just have to decide for yourself. And I think for so many people, there's no satisfaction in that because we don't even have a sense if Maureen has learned anything from this journey, right? Like there isn't any kind of closure or reassurance that because she's with Gary in a completely different country, her life is going to move forward. If anything, this final scene makes me worried that it's just going to begin a new cycle where everything we saw come before, she's going to be right back in that situation of waiting, looking for signs and so on. It's a very frustrating ending, but that's actually why I ended up liking it so much.
Well, but I also feel like, again, the ambiguity of this ending matches the ambiguity not only of how the film... Well, I was going to say how the film handles the supernatural, because we know the supernatural exists, but again, with the texture, with any interaction she's had with someone who might be her brother, like...
We never know.
And one of the things, like we have mediums, but it's going to be impossible, at least at this point in time, to fully understand or comprehend what that is.
Yeah, and I love that too, because it's like... She gets the glass breaks. We see it. It's for us at the house. We see the figure that was, ostensibly carrying it and dropped it. And this, she sees it. She sees it floating. She sees it break. She sees it fall. So it's kind of like she gets, quote unquote, some proof, her sign. But again, what do you do with that? What is that actually doing? Because you still don't understand it. You just know, this really strange thing that my brain is probably not used to seeing just happened in front of me. What does that even mean? And I think that's the same type of uncertainty that that makes sense in the context of what this film is talking about.
Yeah. And I love that we had that brief moment where we got to see the figure that was carrying the glass before it disappears. And here she doesn't even get that. Like she just sees a floating glass. Right. This could be any ghost. We know it's a ghost. It's confirmed. We've had confirmation throughout this whole movie that the supernatural does exist. But yeah, there's no reassurance of who this is, what this is.
Well, that's the trade-off, right? So where another film would just make the entire concept of ghosts be ambiguous, this film at least says, hey, no, we're making this explicit. They're real. But the other thing you really want an answer for, we're not going to give that to you.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Well... Okay, that is Personal Shopper. Ari, as the guest of honor, any final thoughts on this film before we close out?
No, just that I really, really love this movie. I appreciated a chance to get to revisit it in this way and talk about it and just kind of, even just for me, just reevaluate kind of what it means to me. Because again, it's one of those movies that, because I don't mind stories being, open-ended or ambiguous. I enjoy taking the ride with them, and it is such a vibe of a movie that I could just never be bored. It's kind of like it follows for me. Like there's just an energy to it that is so uniquely singular. And so just this movie, it's like that it just hits it checks all the right boxes for me.
When I was talking to Trace about this, Ari, I think the first thing I said was, this is such an Ari film.
Accurate. Well, I'm glad to know that you have a good understanding of my tastes and what I gravitate towards. But yeah, no, it very much is. I love this film. I think it's beautiful. I think it's spooky. It's, and as a vehicle for Kristen Stewart to really kind of break free even further from the Twilight mold. It was just a great moment all around for genre films for me.
This is like my third time seeing this now, because I think I was made to watch this under duress by you the first 2 times I watched it. But it's definitely more I like and appreciate it more each time I watch it, because I do catch more things every time I watch it. And of course, this time watching it and taking notes, I caught a lot more things. But a big recommend on this movie, and especially if you are a Kristen Stewart kind of like, not hater, even though they exist, but like if you're on the fence about her, I think watch more movies like this with her.
Yes. Yeah. I think that this is a good representation of where her tastes are at as she, I think, takes a firmer hand in developing her own career. But yeah, it's a really strong showcase for her, because this is almost entirely her movie, and she's doing a ton of acting with very little dialogue. So I wanted to give a quick shout out also to the cinematographer, Yorick Lasau, because I think this movie, it's telling so much visually, and the way that we're moving the camera and creating spaces. Like, it's really, really important. But overall, this was just such a pleasant surprise. I will freely admit it was not on my radar. I didn't think it was this kind of movie. So I'm very appreciative of you specifically, Ari, for making sure that it was on our radar, especially to cover, because hopefully people will give this movie a chance, because we're talking about it here today.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm so glad to hear that.
Absolutely. But, all right. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Ari, well, thank you for coming on again, and let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, as usual, you all can find me on X, on Instagram, Facebook. Screen name is the Ari Drew, TheAridrew. Oh, also on Letterboxd as well, where I regularly will update my favorite high strangeness films and found footage films. So be sure you follow those playlists, those lists there, just because I do keep them updated. And when I talk to folks about movies and they're asking for recommendations, they often are asking for one of those two, found footage or high strangeness.
Just get on Letterboxd.
Yeah, so there you go. I'll point you there. But yeah, feel free to connect. And again, thank you all so much again for having me.
Of course.
A pleasure.
Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. And if you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 291 hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on Hannibal Season 1, Episode 3, Imaginary, Immaculate, Love Lies Bleeding, and our audio commentary on Rennie Harlan's very dumb but very fun murder mystery, Mindhunters.
Oh my God.
I know.
So dumb and so fun.
It is dumb.
All right, I have to watch it this weekend if you want to watch with me.
Yeah, we'll see. Once was plenty so far. We'll see how
Joe.
Yes.
What are we talking about next week?
Well, I feel like we need to dip a little bit back into the past again, and we haven't talked about Hitchcock in a hot minute, so we're going to hop on a train, Trace, and check out Strangers on a Train.
Oh my God, can we double feature it with Do Revenge, since Do Revenge is basically the teen movie remake of that?
Oh, I wouldn't mind revisiting Do Revenge.
Do Revenge is so good. Yeah,
I've watched it like 3 times this year.
I'll watch that. I'll rewatch that for sure.
Ari's like, oh, I won't do Mindhunters, but I would do Revenge.
Give me Do Revenge.
Do Revenge is so fun. But yes, everyone, this will be a first-time watch for me, Joe. Is it a first-time watch for you?
It is, yeah. I know bare bones about this one.
Yeah, I only know the premise because of Do Revenge.
Oh my God.
But it's okay. Feels like we're in the 90s again with those literary adaptations.
There we go.
All right, everyone. Well, until next week, we can cross out Personal Shopper.
Indeed. And we can cross out Horror Queers.